21st Century Radio is sponsored by Hieronimus and Company. Now more of 21st Century Radio with your host, Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
I am a simple man, and I play a simple tune. I wish that I could see you once again across the room, like the first time. I just want to hold you, I don't want to hold you down. I hear what you're saying.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and our executive producer and research assistants, Laura Kortner. Our engineer is Noah Dankner. Our guest is Graham Nash, and this hour we will hear more about the juggernaut that was Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, his political activism with Jackson Browne, Bonnie Raitt, and other compassionate musicians concerned about making a positive impact on those less fortunate around us. Graham has been gifted with a beautiful voice and a talent for creating the kind of group harmonies that seem to reach into the marrow of your bones, to resonate with your heart and soul. I know that's how millions of people feel when they hear Crosby, Stills, and Nash songs or his solo work, for when he's backed by the multitudes of music stars he has surrounded himself with. In the segments coming up, we will hear about his collaborations with the Everly Brothers, Simon and Garfunkel, and in particular, the very lucrative relationship he shared with Joni Mitchell during a high point for both of them in their songwriting careers. We open this hour with one of his breakup songs he wrote mourning the end of their love affair. It's called Simple Man, and a lot of fans call it their favorite love song of all time. In Wild Tales, Graham notes how his songs are usually simple words, simple melodies, and his feelings for Joni Mitchell were the same, pure and simple. We rejoin Graham now as he details a momentous event in his life when he got a call from the Everly Brothers. The Everly Brothers called you. We did touch on that a little earlier.
Well, the three incidents are, first hearing Bye Bye Love that we talked about, and then going to meet the Everly Brothers when they played in Manchester, which we spoke about, and the record that we made, 6 years later with them that we already spoke about. But there's one more incident that you should know about. I was in Toledo, Ohio, and my phone rang in the hotel room. That's unusual for me. But it was Phil Everly, and I said, "What are you doing calling me in Toledo, Ohio for?" He says, "Well, you're playing this gig tomorrow, but we're playing there tonight. Do you want to come down to the show?" So I go down there with the Everly Brothers to their show, and we're eating, dinner at 5 o'clock after sound check, and Don looks at me and he goes, "So what are you going to sing with us?" I'm telling you, my heart is beating so fast. I mean, this was a dream of singing three-part the Everly Brothers. I have a cassette of me singing So Sad with the Everly Brothers in three-part harmony that is quite fun to listen to. And I recently spoke to Phil and his family, and they gave me permission to put that cassette on the electronic book of the autobiography of Wild Tales.
Well, terrific. Well, one of the first times you heard Jimi Hendrix, I don't think this was necessarily the first, in England, you were sitting behind John, Paul, and George. What was your assessment of Jimi at that time? This is both after. I
personally had never heard anything like it. And I don't think anybody that was sitting there watching had heard anything like it. And there were a lot of important people there. Brian Jones was there. You said John, Paul, and George were there. I was there. A lot of interesting people trying to figure out, what these rumors were. Mm-hmm. The first time that Jimi Hendrix played, music changed completely in all of our lives. There was a certain energy and a certain sexual energy and a certain combination of incredible songs and incredible music and incredible guitar playing that made it obvious to everybody that was watching that Jimi Hendrix was going to be a giant star and that he was something incredibly special on this planet.
Well, that has to be very important because without England and without his going over there, he was having a terrible time here in this country.
But it took England to recognize that talent.
That's right. That's right. And of course, as you know, it was Sir Paul who basically convinced Oh, I can't think of it right now. But
Don't worry.
brought him to the United States for the first time, and he started all over again, burning his guitar on the stage at that
Absolutely,
particular
that was
time.
Monterey. Yeah.
Monterey, thank you. How did Neil Young become part of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and what kind of problems and baggage did he bring into the trio?
No problems, not much baggage. It was basically the music. On that first Crosby, Stills, and Nash record, Stephen had played a vast majority of the instruments. Played lead guitar, bass, he played the piano, he played P3. When we knew that we would have to go out live and support this record, how was that going to be, you know? Stephen can't play everything all at the same time, so we knew that we needed another musician. And I think Stephen and our drummer, Dallas Taylor, had been to England inviting, you know, various people to come join us. Stevie Winwood, he actually talked to Jimmy at one point about joining us. So it was obvious that we needed another musician. Stephen and David were at dinner one night at Ahmet Ertegun's house. Ahmet Ertegun was the CEO and the owner of Atlantic Records and a great supporter and a great recognizer of the talent of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Suggested that we get Neil Young. Now, I'd never met Neil. I knew he was a great writer. I'd listened to, to the Springfield records. I knew who he was, and I knew he was a decent singer, but I'd never met him. And I said to David and Stephen, look, before we make this momentous decision, I have to meet this kid. I don't know whether I can hang out with him. I can be his friend. I don't know whether I can be in a band with him. So I had breakfast on Bleecker Street with Neil Young, and after that record, I would have made him king of the world.
That's right. Now, well, Crosby Stills didn't want to wait, and there was a kind of a pause there for some time as to what you were going to do. And David Crosby, I believed, left the Byrds. Stephen Stills left, was it Buffalo Springfield?
Uh-huh.
And you were in the process of leaving the Hollies and and this was just before Cass introduced you to acid. How did that affect your perceptions of self-awareness and sensibilities?
I think, I'm not one to condone taking drugs at all. And, but in my younger days, it was important for me to be able to open up my mind and be able to think differently. Don't forget I was in the Hollies when we were in a band that, made many hit records that were not very profound. All of a sudden, when you utilize, drugs like marijuana and LSD to open up your consciousness, it can be very profound, and that's exactly what happened to me.
I'm trying to remember exactly how. That's right. You were in England. They came to you, and they were funded. I forgot. You mentioned the fellow who named.
Oh, he only gave him, $5,000 to be able to get to England and come see me.
Oh,
so
sorry.
We had sung together when we were at Joni's, in that famous time when we first put our voices together, which was, of course, an amazing event. Nothing like that. We had never heard that before. Obviously, the Byrds and the Springfield and the Hollies were pretty good harmony bands, but when David and Stephen and I first put our voices together, it was kind of shocking. We had never heard anything so different in our lives. Once I had heard that music, I mean, what would you do if you'd heard that music? You would want more of it, right? And that's what I wanted. And so, yes, there wasn't a lot of baggage when Neil came. It's been very obvious from the start that Neil is a very independent man. He's a brilliant musician and a fantastic songwriter and singer. But he's very much his own man. And he's, he comes and he joins me and David and Stephen when he feels that he has music that needs our voices and our help. And it happens occasionally. And it drives people crazy sometimes when he's not there. And it drives the audience crazy when it's Anne Young sometimes, maybe. It's a crazy thing, but it's what it is. It's the reality of our lives. Neil is an independent man, and he does whatever he wants.
Well, Stephen and Crosby go to England. You guys got all of your material together, actually almost having an album worth of material, and you wanted to record with Apple or A&R, and later presented the music to Simon and Garfunkel. What was the response of A&R and Simon and Garfunkel?
We wanted to be on Apple Records, which is A&R, because they were the Beatles. They were just starting a brand new record company with Freedoms, and they had James Taylor, and Mary Hopkins had a number one records on Apple Records. So we wanted to be there, and we invited George and Peter Asher, who was head of music production at Apple Records at that point, to come and listen to us. And we sang that entire first album to them, and a few days later, the answer came back that they weren't interested in recording us, which kind of shocked us. I mean, we thought that of all the people that we knew, that they would understand what they were listening to. Mm-hmm. But I guess not. Yeah. And we later did the same thing for Paul and Arthur in New York, and same response.
Strange.
And it was kind of shocking to us because, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, we thought we were pretty good.
Well, I thought...
So it was shocking, but that's exactly what happened. And why that happened, I have no idea. Was it jealousy? Was it competition? Was it, I don't know what it was. But neither George Harrison, Peter Asher, Paul Simon, or Art Garfunkel, who heard Crosby, Stills, and Nash at the very beginning of their career, wanted any part of it, which was shocking to us.
Well, it's shocking to me. I had a hard time believing that one. Around this time, you linked up, just actually a little bit before that, with Joni Mitchell. What did you learn from this multi-talented, beautiful genius?
I learned to be alive. I learned to be grateful. I learned a bit more about what songwriting was. I think when people look at all this music, in 100 years to come, they're going to realize that it's probably the Beatles and Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, and Joni Mitchell. And she's a genius, and we all know it. She's a lovely woman, as you know. And I was very grateful to spend a couple of years living with Joni.
Well, John Sebastian weaves himself throughout your biography, and he found you a place in Sag Harbor on Long Island.
Right.
Why did this play, an important part in Crosby, Stills, and Nash's development?
We needed, when we were trying to put that first record together, we needed privacy. And privacy was hard to come by in Laurel Canyon in the late 60s, early 70s. People were very friendly. They would go, to each other's houses and play their new songs and, and invite people to shows. And it was a beautifully social interaction. But we needed privacy. We needed space. We needed nobody there. We needed just us and the musicians and leave us alone. And that's what happened. And John rented us a house in Sag Harbor, and we went there and rehearsed that first record, and it was a wonderful experience.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash had a unique sound. What gave it that unique sound?
I've no idea what makes Crosby, Stills, and Nash vocal sound so unique. I don't quite know. I think it must be some combination of whatever the Everly Brothers have plus an extra voice. I've thought many times about what it is that we do, and to a large degree, I feel very envious of our audience, and I'll tell you why. Because once you're part of a band and you write those songs and you play them for your band members, and they want to record them, and you record them, and then you mix them, and then you master them, and then you do the artwork, we're done. I would love the perspective of having never heard us, of opening, an album and putting it on and hearing what it is that we do. We'll never know that. You will.
Yes, you're right. I do. I have heard some of your albums hundreds of times. I'm not joking you. There's a group especially that I leave in my cars, and the harmonies just put me somewhere else.
Yeah.
They really do. And they show this unity. It's a kind of a unity, but it's the kind of thing that does something to your heart, does something to your mind. I mean, it's like alchemy. Let me put it that way. I know that sounds corny, but it is.
It's not corny. It is alchemy.
Yeah.
I mean, all we're doing is sculpting with air.
Well, it's a real blessing. It really is, especially in the world we have today. What part did marijuana and cocaine play in your writing the songs and your performances?
I have no idea. I have no idea what my life would have been like had I not been, smoking marijuana and snorting cocaine then. We'll never know the answer to that question, will we?
Well, no, you really can't tell. You really can't tell. But at the same time, there's a natural high that comes when you listen to these kind of harmonies.
Yeah, it's this fascinating musical process. I can't even imagine what my life would have been like without music. I'd probably be in an insane asylum.
Well, you're not the only one. There's about 1 billion of us out here.
Yeah.
That if they didn't, you're right. Music has calmed the beast many a time. That's right, and especially the transcendent harmonies of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. That kind of music can calm the savage beast anytime, as billions of us fans appreciate every day. We'll pause now for a commercial as we bathe in some of those harmonies in the 1982 song Wasted on the Way from the album Daylight Again, the one with the 3 UFOs on the cover artwork. In his book, Wild Tales, Graham says this song was written about his own band Crosby, Stills, and Nash and the many breakups and reunions they've had over the years. But, as in most of Graham's work, the lyrics are so deeply simple and universal that they ring true for all of us in practically any situation. Let the water come and carry us away, because we'll be right back.
Wasted on the way. So much water moving underneath the bridge. Let the water come and carry us away. So much love to make up everywhere you turn.
Hi, this is Rayman Zarek of the Doors, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
Open up the gates of the church and let me out of here. Too many people have lied in the name of Christ for anyone to heed the call. So many people have died in the name of Christ that I can't believe it all. Now I'm standing on the grave of a soldier that died in 1799. And the day he died, it was a birthday, and I noticed it was mine. And my head didn't know just who I was, and I went spinning back in time, and I am high up on the altar.
Well, that's got to be one of my favorite lines in a rock song of all time. So many people have died in the name of Christ, I can't believe it all. It's taken from the 1977 album CSN, and it's Graham Nash's song Cathedral, which he says took him 6 years to write. It stemmed from an LSD experience he had in 1971 inside Winchester Cathedral that truly shifted his perspective on his place in the world. As he says in Wild Tales, he knew that if he was going to criticize religion, he had better get the words right. What an amazing, powerful song. This is 21st Century Radio. I'm Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and we are shifting now into the era when Crosby, Stills, and Nash formed the first supergroup and created a game-changer of an album. Your first album was a giant hit. It was called...
Crosby, Stills, and Nash, yes.
Yeah, but... yes, a unique name. Called A Game Changer. What does that mean, a game changer?
Well, there's certain things that come along that move everything forward at an exponential rate. An example is Revolver. That changed everybody's way of recording. Sgt. Pepper, same thing. Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, same thing. There are certain albums that push everything forward faster than it is supposed to move. And that's what great pieces of music do. Mm-hmm. So, when people say that the Crosby, Stills, and Nash record was a game changer, that's just a fantastic compliment to me.
I'll say, yeah. We're going to move in a different direction right now. National Guardsmen murdered 3 students at Kent State in Ohio. What was your response?
Well, first of all, there were 4.
Oh, excuse me, 4.
That's okay. We can't forget that 4th one. Terrible story. Crosby, obviously, and I and everybody was incredibly upset that America decided at this point to start slaughtering its own children. It's the 4 students at Kent State in Ohio in May 4, 1970. They had a constitution, God-given right to speak up against their government should they think that their government wasn't acting correctly. And the students there at Kent State were protesting the secret bombing of Cambodia by Nixon and Kissinger. Somebody ordered live ammunition to be put into those rifles. Somebody must have given the, permission to start shooting. One of the saddest things is that no one has apologized to the family of those 4 kids that were slaughtered that day. No one has called to apologize. No one has called to explain exactly what happened. It was a terrible time in American history, and as I said before, once we were starting to kill our own children, we had to say something. David showed Neil the picture, of the girl leaning over the body of the slain student that was on the cover of probably every magazine in the world. Neil got his guitar and came back an hour later with a song called Ohio. Crosby called me in Los Angeles, told me to get the studio ready and the band, and that him and Neil were going to come down to the studio, and we would start record this song tomorrow. Well, we trusted Crosby enough. When he gets that excited, you have to act. And so even though I didn't know what the song was, I booked the studio and the band and the engineer, et cetera, et cetera. David and Neil came down the next day. We recorded Ohio in about an hour and a half. We recorded the B-side in about an hour. We mixed it and gave the tape to Art Erdogan, who was in the studio. He went back to New York, and we had that single out on the airwaves within 12 days. 12 days. We had actually killed our own single.
Yeah.
My song, Teach Your Children, was in the top 20. It was heading up to the top of the charts. We did not care. We thought it was far more important that people know that America was slaughtering its own children than having another hit record.
Mm-hmm. Well, in your book, it says, "Listen, man, we want it out now. We told them this is too big a deal. The country has started shooting its own children. Things have spun out of control. But they said, you've got Teach Your Children going to #1, he said. Pull it, I told him." That says it all right there.
It shows you who Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young are.
Yes, it does. It does. David Crosby introduced you to Jackson Browne. What effect did Jackson Browne have on your music and on your activism?
Obviously, Jackson Browne is a brilliant musician. He's been a brilliant musician since the day I met him, which was in Wally Hyder's studio when we were mixing a record. He came into the studio. He was a friend of David's. He was this brash teenager, full of life, full of piss and vinegar. He was a fabulous character. I am most grateful to have Jackson Browne in my life. Here is a man who is committed totally to making the world a better place for not only himself and his children and family and friends, but my children and my family and my friends and your children and your family and your friends. Jackson Browne has been an incredibly effective musical force for good, as is Bonnie Raitt and as a bunch of my friends are all committed to try and make the planet a better place.
Well, you believe that the gun lobby, along with the tobacco lobby, the alcohol lobby, and pharmaceutical lobby will be seen as major criminals in the future. Could you please explain why?
What would you call a company that knew that the product that they were selling killed people by the hundreds of thousands? And let's just talk about tobacco for a second, because it really applies to all of the ones that you just mentioned. What kind of a company does that, knowing full well that what you're producing and selling to the public is killing them by the hundreds of thousands? Even today, over 300,000 people a year die because of cigarettes. What do you call a company like that? Yes, a company like that, like the tobacco industry, have incredible political clout and can afford to buy congressmen and make sure that they remain in business. But what would you call an organization like that? What would you call an organization like the pharmaceutical industry that is robbing people blind like this because of the medicines that they need? What would you call an industry like the liquor lobby, where they know that the just driving deaths alone equal, the amount of people that are being killed by cigarettes? That's what I mean by being criminals.
Well, it was the tobacco industry that had a great deal to do with the funding of what we call the Tea Party in the United States of America. As long as, of course, also the gun lobby and the alcohol lobby, but they played a major part in that, as well as Exxon.
Yeah, they don't want to disturb the status quo. They want it to be bread and circuses again.
Exactly. Yes.
Give the people something to eat and give them something to look out to distract them from the fact that we're robbing them blind. And it's the same that's going on today. I mean, the Koch brothers, and people like that are all part of this bread and circuses. And one of the things about people like the Koch brothers, and unfortunately, their family name has become synonymous with everything that's bad in industry. And a lot of people say, well, don't they have kids? Don't they have grandchildren? Don't they know what their industries are doing to pollute and rob this planet? Don't they know? They have, hundreds of billions of dollars. Isn't that enough? It becomes mind-boggling after a while.
Well, it's worse than that. Now, Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young were branded a political band, and you were flamethrowers in the best democratic sense. Could you give us a few examples of some of the songs that branded you as such?
Yeah, sure. You can go all the way back to For What It's Worth, that Stephen wrote about the riots in Los Angeles. You can trace it back to Crosby writing Long Time Gone after he heard that Robert Kennedy had been assassinated. You can go from my song Chicago, in which, certain people had been interrupting the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968 and were punished severely for it. And my song Chicago is about the fairness and the justice of binding and chaining and gagging a man on the stand, namely Bobby Seale, and calling it a fair trial. You can go from Ohio that Neil wrote to my song that I wrote with James Raymond recently called Burning for the Buddha, about the 128 Tibetan monks that have burned themselves to death in this year alone because of the conflict between the Tibetan people and the Chinese government. So we have to wake up every morning and we have to, check on what's going on in the world, and we have to get on with our lives and write about it, and that's all we do.
I think that's what the songs do. They all of this music, I almost said inflames the heart, but it does. It opens your heart, and it makes you feel like you got to do something. We can't sit around and watch this happening, regardless of what, the media is so complicit in all of this. It has been
because they're all owned by the people that are making profit.
That's correct. I mean, it's just that simple. And you have interlocking directorates. You have these interlocking. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you.
That's okay. Yeah, but it's just amazing that you watch people like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and Amy Goodman and Rachel Maddow and, at one point Keith Olbermann only telling us the truth and getting you real news from a comedy show, as in the case of Jon Stewart. But, it's insane. We are so controlled by the media. They don't want protest songs on their airwaves. They just want us to be sheep. Buy another pair of sneakers. Buy another soft drink. Shut up while we rob you. That's what's going on.
That's exactly what is going on. Fortunately, along comes Susan Sennett, and is the love of your life. Yes. How did you meet, and how has she allowed you to be yourself?
I don't know how she's allowed me to be myself. I met Susan in late August of 1965 when David and I were staying at the Chateau Marmont on Sunset Boulevard making the Wind on the Water album. We've been together ever since. I've been married to Susan for, 30-odd years already, 36, 37 years. And I'm still discovering great things about this woman. And she still keeps me laughing, and she still keeps me grounded, and she still keeps giving me, advice and information that makes my life better. I love this woman. She's fantastic.
You want to tell us a little the story about the bird that she was working?
Well, yeah, David and I, as I said before, were staying at the Chateau Marmont making the record, and I think Susan was making dinner or something, and Susan Sennett is a sculptress. One of the things that she does is she sculpts in alabaster, and she brought a piece that she was working on. She was making a bird out of this, 18 inches by 5-inch piece of alabaster that she had, and it was obviously recognizable as a bird. And I saw her working on this piece of sculpting, and I actually realized that I was falling in love with this woman immediately. And I walked over to her, and I put my hand on her shoulder, and I told her I loved her, and she knocked the head off the bird. Mm-hmm. Oh, dear. What can you do? But we turned it into music, and David and I wrote a song called Broken Bird.
Broken Bird, right. Well, when you're a talented lyricist with a musician like David Crosby as your writing partner, you can turn any accident and practically any tragedy into beautiful music. And we're listening now to a little snatch from this song, Broken Bird, that Graham Nash wrote for his wife of 30-plus years, Susan Sennett. Now, this is 21st Century Radio, and I'm Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and we'll be right back with Graham Nash.
There's a story I'd like you to listen to about a lady and the broken bird, broken by the hammer. You took it so hard, you hardly said a word. Sending them back over the lines, whistling down the wire from pole to pole.
Hi, this is Roseanne Cash, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus. I have very seldom enjoyed an interview this much.
Oh, really?
Very seldom.
Well, ditto.
Take the train from Casablanca going south. Blowing smoke rings from the corners of my mouth. Glowing crackers hang in the air. Charming cobras in the square. Striped leathers we can wear at home. Oh, let me hear you now. Would you know we're riding on the Marrakesh Express?
We're entering our final segment on the 21st Century Radio interview with Graham Nash, and that was a little bit from his song Marrakesh Express, a song he wrote while still a member of the Hollies, but just as he was beginning to outgrow them. He tells in Wild Tales how the other members of the Hollies just didn't get this song, and fortunately, it was shelved to appear later on the groundbreaking album of 1969, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. In this final segment of the program, we turn to Graham's strong sense of political activism and social justice that has paralleled his musical career. From forming No Nukes with Jackson Browne, Bonnie Raitt and Harvey Wasserman, and John Hall, to performing at Occupy Wall Street in 2011 with David Crosby and his son James, and releasing the song Almost Gone that we will close this hour with, a tribute to Bradley Manning. Graham Nash has not only been vocal about his advocacy for a more just and sustainable world, but he has galvanized millions of others to do the same, and with huge paradigm-changing effects. We are all aboard the same train, friends, and we must start thinking of ourselves as Earth people if we want to have an Earth that our great-grandchildren can enjoy. We'll start with Graham's concern about the world's water supply. The world's dwindling water supply is a major concern in 2013, but in 1978, you were very worried about it. Tell us about that.
I used to live in San Francisco for about 10 years, and occasionally I would see billboards that were kind of funny, but not, and it was the billboard said, "Shower with a friend, we're running out of water." And I started to talk to people in San Francisco, and they were upset. Why are we sending all our water down to that desert called Los Angeles? And I saw what we were doing with the Colorado River between California and Mexico. And I whenever I get a piece of information like that, I try and extrapolate what's going to happen in the years to come. And I realized right then in 1977 that water was going to be a bigger problem than oil, that it was going to be more precious than oil because you can't drink oil and you need to drink water. And so I decided that if I was going to get married and have kids, that I wanted water to never be a problem in my life. And so as I'm speaking to you now, I'm overlooking one of the wettest spots on Earth.
And that is in Hawaii?
Well, I live on this island in Hawaii, and our average rainfall is about just over 450 inches a year.
Well, it doesn't look like you're going to run out there.
Well, the truth is that I've been here for over 35 years, and I've seen a remarkable decrease in the amount of water.
Oh, no.
Sure, we still have plenty of water, but it's changed dramatically in 30 years. But there's no global warming. Don't forget, George Bush told us.
That's just to get you afraid. That's all. That's what they're trying to do, is scare us.
Right.
And how pathetic.
Indeed.
What kind of pathetic thinking is this? And you got what has happened? Well, I better stop there, but let me go into something else here then. 3 Mile Island incident was far worse than we've ever been told. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and some of the horror stories?
Well, it's very obvious that the nuclear industry is grinding to a halt. Between 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima, people are beginning to realize that this is the wrong path. You know, to boil water with atomic energy to make steam, to make electricity is an incredibly poisonous way of dealing with the planet, and it's very obvious. You talk to any reasonable scientist, and they will tell you that that there's no safe level of exposure to radiation, and that it will continue to haunt us for many, many thousands of years to come. I was at dinner one night with Jacques Cousteau, and I asked Jacques what he thought the biggest problem facing humanity was, and he looked at me and he said, the nuclear police. And I said, what? Because I was expecting, some kind of a fish answer, some ocean thing, because it's Jacques Cousteau, for God's sake. Yeah. No, nuclear police. So when Jacques filled us in on what was going on in the nuclear power industry, myself and Jackson and Bonnie and James Taylor got together and did the No Nukes concerts in New York in the late 70s. Because we need to let people know, the incredible dangers of what's going on. I mean, look what's going on in Fukushima as we speak. As we speak, there are thousands of tons of irradiated water being poured into the Pacific, because they've had to keep water on those fuel rods to keep them from igniting, keep them cool. But what they're doing with the water is letting it run off into the Pacific Ocean. Mm-hmm. There have been incidences of fish off Alaska and off San Diego that are irradiated.
That's correct.
And it can only be from Fukushima. Mm-hmm. This is a disaster. And it's very typical of the nuclear power industry. They know that they're making millions of dollars on constructing the plants and producing electricity. They also know that it's incredibly dangerous and incredibly toxic. And so it's all going to change, and it should change.
Well, it has to change. I don't know where Fukushima is ever going to get their water to drink. They're going to have to import it from somewhere, because you can't trust what's going on in regards to the wonderful source of waters they used to have. And we're not hearing about that discussed anywhere. And every time... I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Them circuses. Come on, Bob. Let's get real. We know what's going on.
Yeah, and it means more or less, if they get away with this, then some very drastic things need to take place in regards to the consciousness of the people on this planet. We just can't stand it. We just can't allow this.
I know, but the obvious one of the obvious solutions to that problem is that you educate the people and you make them smarter and you make them more aware of what's going on around the world. But that's the last thing that they want them to know. That's
right. That's correct. Now, today, you're a family man. How has your marriage, your children, centered you? And well, I think it's a rebirthing of you, not only your music and photography, but your love of our planet.
I look at the world through the eyes of my children, and I'm trying to make it a better place for them. And especially now, my firstborn son Jackson, just a year and a month ago, gave us a beautiful baby granddaughter. And I look at the world through her eyes, and I wonder what an incredibly awful place it could be. But we have to try and work together. We have to, first of all, become aware of what's going on. Information is the first secret of trying to deal with any problem. You have to figure out what the problem is and then start to deal with it. But with all due respect, the way that people have been brought up, in the last couple of 100 years, you need 3 square meals a day. You need to get your kids fed. You need to get them off to school. You need to drive on the freeway to your boss who hates you. You need to take 10 minutes for lunch. You need to fight the freeway back home. You need to pick up your kids from school. You need to feed them. Your old man comes home from work. He needs feeding. What possible time do you have to deal with the rest of the world?
Very little.
We are very lucky that we have the space to be able to think about this. The majority of people don't even have time to think about what's going on in Egypt, what's going on in Yemen, what's going on in Somalia. They have no time to deal with it. They're too busy trying to figure out how to exist in a world where the gap between the rich and the poor is growing immensely by the day.
Do you have any thoughts on the new Pope?
I do. First of all, the Vatican must be an incredible machine. It must be insane. It has so much money. It has so much going for it. But this Pope that I'm witnessing now seems to have his feet on the ground. Seems to understand that the core idea of the church needs to be brought back to one of serving the people. When I see, all these guys in red dresses with gold chains around their necks, swinging incense around, it doesn't make any sense to me when people are starving by the million. And I think the church has lost its ability to be there for the people. And I think this Pope is trying very much to swing the image of the Vatican around to one of serving the people rather than just, enjoying the status quo.
Yes, indeed. Boy, the Pope just before him was just unbelievable, just a tyrant in lots of different ways. Graham, you are politically active for social justice causes, and I'd like to give you a few minutes to share your passion about whatever cause is forefront in your mind these days. What should American people be working on to change?
It is such an incredibly complicated problem. Everything is so intertwined. But one of the first things that we need to do is find out the true information about what is going on, because unless you have the true information, there's very little you can do to stop any of these problems. And everything is so intertwined. What do you talk about? Do you talk about global warming, which will eat the planet and bite us in the ass in the few years to come? Do we talk about the nuclear problem? Do we talk about the military problem? Do we talk about the NSA? Do we talk about, what do you want to talk about? It's all so incredibly ingrained and tied together. It's very, very difficult. The one thing that we can do is realize that we are human beings, that we are decent people, that we are grown-up people, and we try and treat each other with respect and try and teach each other with love and with understanding and try and work together to try and undo all these insanely wrapped-up problems.
Well, thank you. This has been one of the most extraordinary biographies I've ever read, because I don't know how you remembered it all. Did you keep journals? Did
Nope.
you have notes? How do you remember all of this?
I still have a brain, Bob.
Well, yeah, but still, you pull these dates out of it. And this book is just filled. I touched on so few things within this book.
I know. What can you do, though?
Well, what you can do is you do what you did, and I hope other people that are active in this kind of work do the same thing.
We all need help.
You're damn right we do.
We all need help, and we all need each other, so let's get on with it.
Well, I think we're getting on with it. In March, Crosby, Stills, and Nash is going to be performing again. I think you're going to start in Virginia. In 2 places, March and 5th.
The truth is we've been working incredibly hard for the last 5 years. I have 3 months off right now, and I don't even want to hear about what's going on next.
Well, okay, I hope to get down there on March 4th or 5th and
I'm sure you will.
on one of those things. Well, thank you again for joining us. I greatly appreciate your patience. I really do.
It's always an interesting conversation with you, Bob.
Ditto. And I don't think we have anything that you'd be interested in sending. You never had any interest in UFOs, did you?
Of course I have interest in UFOs.
Oh, you do?
Of course. How can we mathematically, looking out, I mean, you've got to understand, where I live, there's no light. There's no light at night. I see millions and millions of stars, and that's only in this one galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies. Mathematically, if anybody was to say that we are absolutely alone in terms of any life form, they are mad.
Yes, they are. I think they've already identified, I don't know how many tens of thousands of planets just like Earth in some way or other.
That's right, in that Goldilocks zone, yes, indeed.
That's right.
You know, not too hot, not too cold.
Always just right.
Interest in UFOs because I really believe that there are other life forms out there, whether they're technologically as advanced to be able to, to make, airships that will fly through space. Who the hell knows? Maybe it's just mud bubbling, but there's life somewhere out there.
No, undoubtedly.
Just know it.
Well, the reason why I brought that up is I've done a lot of interviews in this particular area, and we have been sent numerous DVDs, documentation on this.
Sure. Send them on.
Okay, we'll send them on. And
got it, Bob.
Thank you for taking the time, Graham. You're been
very
terrific.
welcome, Bob. It's always a pleasure.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was Graham Nash, friends, who continues to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. We're going out with a new song he wrote with James Raymond, that is David Crosby's son, about the cruel and inhumane conditions that Private Bradley Manning was imprisoned under and held for over a year without trial. It's called Almost Gone, and it reminds me a bit about the song we played earlier that Graham wrote when his own father was imprisoned unfairly. Now, this is a man who opens his mouth and speaks out when he sees injustice. Learn more at grahamnash.com.